Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre continues to call for an independent public inquiry into China's alleged interference in Canadian elections. We hear from a former healthcare worker who said it took her over a year to recover from her COVID-19 vaccine injury. And a unique wildlife festival is coming to our city featuring some exotic creatures.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre talked about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recently announced measures aimed at addressing alleged foreign interference in Canada's federal elections. Poilievre says our Prime Minister and Beijing have a very long history together.
For 10 years, the authoritarian dictatorship in Beijing has been supporting Justin Trudeau. They started by giving $200,000 to the Trudeau Foundation. They helped him in 2 consecutive elections. He's known about this for a decade. You're telling me he didn't know that Beijing gave $200,000 to the Trudeau Foundation? Are you telling me that he didn't know that they interfered in 2 consecutive elections? Of course he knew. He was briefed multiple times, and he kept all of those briefings secret. And then, when he got caught, he hired the former CEO of the same Trudeau Foundation that had received the money from China to write a report about it. And now he's trying to cover it up again.
Poilievre says Conservatives want an open, independent public inquiry to get to the truth and safeguard future elections. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is going to be appointing a special rapporteur to look into potential election interference. Political reporter Brian Lilly says Trudeau will announce who it is, and this individual will answer to the PM directly.
What Trudeau announced was he will eventually name a special rapporteur. Which is just a fancy way of saying he's going to appoint someone to look into this. They're still going to report to him. He's going to be the one who chooses them, says it will be an eminent Canadian. All 3 opposition parties, the Conservatives, the Bloc, the NDP, they all say, we want a say in who is chosen, not just a consultation. Trudeau said he would consult with the opposition leaders. Yves-François Blanchet, the Bloc leader, had the best line on that. He said, consultation with Justin Trudeau means a 5-minute phone call, then he does what he wants. So this doesn't cut it.
Mr. Lilly will also talk about the comments CPC leader Pierre Poilievre made on his 3 MPs who met with controversial German politician Christine Anderson. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. A welcoming ceremony took place in Kingston, Ontario for visiting European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She's visiting Kingston and Ottawa as part of her 3-day official visit to Canada. Von der Leyen was elected in 2019 as the first female president of the European Commission, which is the executive body of the European Union. She's also scheduled to address the Canadian Parliament in the House of Commons chamber. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada's strong relationship with European countries is very important. He says we must be unified in supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia.
Today, I can announce that we are extending our engineering training as part of Operation Unifier until at least the fall, and deploying CAF medical trainers to help Ukrainian forces with combat medical skills. We're also investing $3 million for demining in Ukraine and working with the EU to deliver energy equipment to Ukraine for their power grid.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen echoed the Prime Minister's support for Ukraine and says what Ukraine really needs right now are more weapons.
The European Union has already delivered 12 billion euros worth of military equipment so far. In parallel, we will continue training Ukrainian soldiers like you are doing so, but you have been doing since 2015 already. And therefore, here too, our coordination with the Canadian mission and the EU military assistant mission in Ukraine and for Ukraine is excellent. Our goal is, on the European side, to train 30,000 troops by the end of the year.
Well, it was kind of a chilly one across much of southwestern Alberta again today. We even saw some light flurries. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, more of the white stuff could be on the way?
yeah, looks like we could see another 60% chance this evening and more Wednesday as well. In fact, most of the week is going to be sprinkled with some flurries as we get into the weekend. Could be a great time to hit the slopes. Now, as I was mentioning, this evening's snowfall, the overnight low -12, so that could be accompanied with a 15K wind, making that -12 feel more like -19. And then as we look into Wednesday, the daytime high -7, but feeling more like -17 with that wind chill to accompany that snowfall. What can I say? It's March. Seems to be when we get the most amount of snow during the winter. I'll be back later in the show to give you the forecast for the rest of the week and the upcoming weekend.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Alberta government announced that it is creating more than 1,000 new spaces for students in high-demand apprenticeship programs in both colleges and universities. That includes a funding boost of $15 million over 3 years to the apprenticeship learning grants. Minister of Skill, Trades and Professions, Casey Medew, says Alberta is on a roll.
We are leading the country in economic growth, and we are focused on even more job creation and diversification as we continue to be the economic engine of our country. As our economy continues to grow and diversify, Alberta is already experiencing a high demand for skilled workers in many sectors. On top of that, many of Alberta's skilled trades are expecting to see higher numbers of retirement over the next few years. Within that big picture, skilled trades are more vital than ever.
Now here's an update to a story we first brought you last week involving a proposed TransAlta wind turbine project. The Ripplinger Wind Power Project, which would cover over 14,000 acres of land near Cardston County, isn't sitting well with the residents of the area. They say it'll have a great impact on wildlife and their community. An official with TransAlta says they're listening to the concerns of residents, but studies were done in the area beforehand to see if the area would be negatively impacted.
We heard a lot of those concerns when we reached out to the community. And part of what we do when we develop a project is we go out there and we do all our studies. We send out the biologists, they collect information about the wetlands, the birds in the area, the wildlife in the area, and then we build that into how we design the project so that we can mitigate the impacts. And so that's what we did. And a lot of that feedback that we got from those studies went into how we laid out our turbines so that there was minimal impact to the wildlife in the area.
Now, the project is in phase 1, and if approved, construction would begin this year. It would be fully operational by the year 2025. Lethbridge City Council looked into the potential of more support for Streets Alive mission here in our city. Council debated on a motion of allocating over $215,000 in federal funding to the Christian organization for its outreach programs through the year 2026. It was shot down by a 6-3 vote.
So I think it's important that we, right now, because of the situation that's coming up very soon, encampments are coming again, I think we need to be proactive.
We've had nearly a year to debrief this, to research it, and to prepare our response for this spring. And council is now being put in a position where we look like the bad guys because we're not going to fund a program that, quite candidly, is not fulsome in its explanation of what it hopes to accomplish or how it proposes to do that.
Of note, Streets Alive was the only group that applied for the federal funding to go towards outreach programming, which would include helping our city's most vulnerable. Lethbridge City Council decided against increasing parking fines. There was talk of increasing the fines from $25 to $50, but it was shot down. Instead, Council voted to work with the Downtown BRZ and the Heart of Our City Committee to present new parking fine options moving forward. Officials say the current fines will remain the same until new recommendations are proposed in the fall. Lethbridge City Council, John Middleton Hope, put forward a motion at Council that there should be term limits for memberships on boards and committees for councillors. This means members of Council would serve a maximum 3-year term with 2 councillors at a time. This would include the Lethbridge Housing Authority, Green Acres Foundation, and the Highway 3 Twinning Association. He also said each person should forego additional financial compensation for sitting on these committees and boards, or instead donate the funds to a charity of their choosing. Middleton Hope said he recently came under fire for comments on why he brought up the motion in the first place.
There have been some reports in news media in regards to comments attributed to me regarding this particular initiative, and I accept those comments fully, and I apologize to my colleagues. The intent was not to embarrass anyone. It was not to point fingers at anyone indicating that they might have taken money from an organization that they shouldn't have. That was not the intent of this. The intent of this is to really allow us to have a fulsome look at our boards, committees, and commissions, our time limits on them, to encourage members of council to sit on more than just 1 or 2 boards during their tenure, which would allow them a more rounded understanding for the various boards, committees, and commissions.
Council voted unanimously for the matter to go back to the governance SBC and then be referred back to City Council on October the 31st. Officials with the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre are not happy. They say they were not included for an increase in funding with the recently released Alberta budget. The CEO for the centre, Christine Cassie, says they worked tirelessly with the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services to reduce wait times for victims who are seeking counselling. Cassie says it's frustrating that it appears as though they've been excluded from the budget.
This is a different crime from all of the crimes that happen. And when we see a province that's doing so well, both financially and the rest, I think it's important that we look after all of its citizens, not just those that may be the voting public, but others that may not have that type of voice yet. If we truly want fully productive citizens, we need to invest with the trauma treatment that is needed for sexual assault victims, for children who've experienced childhood abuse, and the rest of it. So I think that there is an impetus on the government to actually step up and do their part that way as well.
Bridge City News reached out to government officials for comment, but have yet to hear back. Sloths, boa constrictors, a porcupine, and even a wallaroo will be making their way to the Lethbridge and District Exhibition Mart 10th through the 12th for the 2023 Wildlife Festival. Staff for the event say there will be around 50 animals in total for you to pet, hug, or just look at. Jason Clevitt, one of the promoters of the event, says his crew has had a number of people come up to him saying how much they really appreciate the work that they do.
We had someone who had terminal cancer, and one of her bucket lists was to meet a sloth. We've had people that have lost family members or people that have been going through a hard time. And for every person that we know their story, there's a dozen others that we don't. And that's the biggest thing. And I think the reason why we do this is those moments and those connections and those opportunities to give people a moment and an experience and forget their problems for a few hours.
A special quiet hour starting at 10 a.m. on Saturday will be available for kids who are sensitive to large crowds or noises. The city of Grande Prairie, Alberta has voted to create its own city police force. The new force would replace the RCMP. Council voted 8-1 in favor of a new municipal force following an assessment of policing in the Peace Country. Grande Prairie Mayor Jackie Clayton said online that transitioning to a municipal police service will best serve our community and create a more locally responsive policing solution with local oversight, addressing local needs. The city is hoping to transition to a municipal force over the next 5 years. The cost is expected to be around $19 million. The city received close to $10 million over 2 years from the province for startup and transition funding. Grande Prairie becomes the first Alberta community to switch from the RCMP to municipal police service since 1956. The subject of COVID-19 vaccine injuries has been a hot-button and controversial topic. Claims of vaccine injuries are often dismissed if there were pre-existing conditions prior to receiving a dose. Charissa Clam, a former healthcare worker, says after receiving her second jab, she endured a long battle due to a confirmed vaccine injury. She now stresses the importance of doing your own independent research before allowing foreign substances into your body. She says she does not want others to go through what she experienced.
A lot of people were pro-vaccine, and I was one of them because I was a healthcare worker my whole life, and I had all my immunizations up to date, and so does my son. But after this, it's completely changed my mind. I am definitely not. I really have to rethink and do a lot of research before anything like this ever happens to me again. And I just hope people push themselves to do the research themselves to look into, a possible vaccine injury if you do get symptoms that maybe, you do need to go seek help.
Make sure you catch the full, powerful interview with former healthcare worker and paramedic Charissa Clam and BCN's Naveen Day coming up after Business News. Two Americans whose abduction in Mexico was captured in a video that showed them caught in a cartel shootout have been found dead. Officials say the victims are Zindel Brown and Sheed Woodard. Police say two others who were kidnapped with them were found alive, with one of them being wounded. The survivors, Eric Williams and Lativiat McGee, have returned to the United States. Officials say the Americans were not directly targeted and that there was some sort of a misunderstanding. Mexican investigators said the kidnappers may have wrongly believed the Americans were rival human traffickers. So far, just a 24-year-old suspect has been arrested. Ukrainian soldiers fighting in the Donetsk region have expressed their need to defend Bakhmut with Russian forces encroaching on the devastated eastern city.
Они не считаются с потерями, ни с людскими, ни с техническими. Они давят, ихняя принципиальная позиция захватить Бахмут. А наша принципиальная его отстоять, потому что это уже не просто, город, это уже для нас символ. Это наш город-крепость Бахмут.
It was on this day that Nazi leader Adolf Hitler brought troops into his demilitarized Rhineland region, violating the treaty ending World War I and moved Europe a step closer to World War II. And Hollywood director Stanley Kubrick, who brought us such films as 2001: Space Odyssey and Full Metal Jacket, died at the age of 70. This is Today in History for March the 7th.
March 7th, 1965. A bloody Sunday for America's civil rights movement in Selma, Alabama. That's where state troopers and a sheriff's posse attacked civil rights marchers pushing to register black voters. The violence leads to two more high-profile marches and later the passage of the Voting Rights Act. 1936. Nazi Germany's dictator Adolf Hitler sends troops into his country's demilitarized Rhineland region. The move violates the treaty ending World War I and brings Europe a step closer to a second world war just years later. And 1999.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Movie director Stanley Kubrick, whose films include 2001: A Clockwork Orange and Full Metal Jacket, dies at age 70. The year before his death, he told the Associated Press that despite the heartache, there's nothing like making movies.
Although it can be like trying to write War and Peace in a bumper car in an amusement park, when you finally get it right, there are not many joys in life that can equal the feeling.
Today in History, March 7th. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Well, we received a little more snow across much of southwestern Alberta again today, and don't put the shovel away just yet, as more flurries are in the forecast. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, the average high for this time of year in Lethbridge is around 4 degrees. We've been quite a bit below that for a little while now, and we're seeing more snow. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, when can we expect things to maybe clear up and warm up?
Well, not right away, Hal. We are going to hover in those low minuses, basically seasonal up until next week, early into the week. That's when we're going to get back into the pluses. -7 is the daytime high tomorrow. Going to feel more like -17, though, with that wind chill. We are also looking at a 60% chance of flurries. And then as we get into Thursday, mainly cloudy skies, high of -7 again, -8 the expected high on Friday. Looking at flurries again, once again on Saturday, another 60% chance of flurries, -6 the high there. And then we're going to jump up to 0 on Sunday, and that's when it's going to possibly stop snowing. We're looking at partly cloudy skies that day, and then jump up to the pluses again for a high of 7 degrees on Monday. Okay, so the almanac tells us the average high for this time of year, 4 degrees, average low -8. So we're basically staying in that range, maybe just going a little smidge under that. Wind chill, though, is a little bit of a different story. 18 was our high temperature on this day back in 2005, and back in 1951, we were sitting at -34. 7:03, that is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening at 6:22 p.m., giving us 11 hours and 19 minutes of daylight. Okay, looking to the west coast tomorrow, 9 degrees, the expected high in Victoria, with a mix of sun and cloud. Could see a 40 wind as well. 9 degrees, the high in Vancouver. Vancouver also looking at mix of sun and cloud. And here's something different too, actually, an index, a UV index of 3, which is moderate for Vancouver. Not so much in Edmonton, though. Edmonton looking at a 60% chance of flurries. Calgary also seeing some periods of light snow. As we get to the rest of the prairies, -14 the high in Saskatoon, -12 in Regina, -5 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg expecting about 2 centimeters of the white stuff. Also keep in mind with the wind chill, especially in Saskatoon, you're looking at a risk of frostbite with -28 as the morning wind chill. Toronto looking at a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow, 2 degrees the high, 0 expected in Ottawa and 4 in Montreal. 30% chance of flurries in both of those cities. As we move on to the Maritime, so that's we're seeing a 30% chance of flurries or rain showers for both Fredericton and Halifax, 4 degrees the high in those cities as well. Charlottetown looking at periods of snow, 1 degree the high there, and a 60% chance of flurries in St. John's and up to a 60K wind there as well, 0 degrees the high. There you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Apple's partner in India, Foxconn Technology Group, is planning to invest around $700 million on a new plant in India to ramp up production. The Taiwanese company plans to build a plant to make new parts for the iPhone. There's also word that the factory may also build Apple handsets and produce some parts for its electric vehicle business. The investment is one of Foxconn's largest and shows how China is at risk of losing its status as the world's largest producer of consumer electronics. BlackBerry shares dropped nearly 13% after company officials say revenue from its cybersecurity business will be lower than expected. The Ontario-based company says large deals that were expected to close in the fourth quarter simply did not. Company officials also said they expect to take a one-time non-cash charge of up to $440 million US in its fourth quarter related to its Spark security business. In a preliminary look for the quarter ending February 28th, it says it expects total revenue of around $151 million. Revenue for the full year should be around $656 million. Members of Parliament are gearing up to grill CEOs of Canada's largest grocery store chains at the House of Commons Agriculture Committee. It's part of its study on food inflation. Experts are urging the panel to push the leaders of companies such as Loblaw and Metro for more transparency on why grocers are making record profits during high inflation. Experts say MPs should ask for financial information to find out what is driving these huge profits. The company's financial statements do not include profit breakdowns. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 239 points on the day to finish at 20,275. The Dow was down 574 points to 32,856. The S&P 500 was down 62 on the day to 3986. And the Nasdaq was down 145 points to 11,530. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 288 to 77.58 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 11 cents to 269 US. Gold was even on the day at $18.1345 US an ounce, and silver was also even at $20.08 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.75 per bushel, barley's at $9.08, canola's at $18.47, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down 13 cents to 165.98. Feeder cattle March contract was up 5 cents to 192.13. And lean hogs April contract was up $1.33 to 84.80. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.74 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced that it is creating more than 1,000 new spaces for students in high-demand apprenticeship programs in colleges and universities. That includes a funding boost of $15 million over 3 years to the apprenticeship learning grants. Political reporter Brian Lilly is coming up. You'll have the latest on Bill C-11, or the Internet Censorship Bill, as the Conservatives call it. Mr. Lilly will also discuss what the opposition parties have to say about alleged interference in Canadian federal elections. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.